My parents always claimed they loved me equally, but love should never feel like an afterthought, like you're just an extra seat at a table reserved for someone else. On the night of my honors ceremony, the night I had been working toward for years, the night every sleepless study session and every sacrificed weekend finally came together, they weren't there. They didn't even text me, not a single, "We're proud of you." Instead, they sat comfortably across town, ordering appetizers and lighting candles for my sister's dinner, which somehow swallowed my 18th birthday whole. I remember standing on that stage, clutching the certificate I thought would finally make them see me, scanning the crowd for faces that would never appear, feeling a hollow pit grow in my chest. 18 is supposed to be the year you step into your own life, the year you're celebrated, but mine was erased, rewritten into a script where my role didn't exist. What made it worse was how casually it happened, how normal they made it sound, like it was logical that one daughter's milestones could be merged into another's spotlight. They didn't just miss a night, they missed me, over and over, until I started to wonder if I had ever truly mattered in their story at all. I can still hear the applause from that night, polite and scattered, echoing in the gymnasium as if it were meant for someone else, as if my accomplishments were too small to fill the room. My teachers shook my hand. One of them even whispered, "Your parents must be so proud." And I smiled like I believed it. But the truth was, when I walked off that stage, the emptiness of the bleachers where they should have been was louder than the applause. I drove myself home afterward, in a car that smelled faintly of my sister's perfume because she had borrowed it earlier that week. When I opened the front door, the house was dark. No balloons, no cake, no cards on the counter. Just a Post-it on the fridge with a quick note, "Dinner at Bella's, leftovers in the fridge." Bella, my sister, who always seemed to orbit in the center of their world, while I was expected to adjust my life to fit around hers. That night, I heated up cold pasta alone, in the same kitchen where I had once blown out birthday candles surrounded by laughter. But 18 was different. It was supposed to mark freedom, adulthood, independence. Instead, it felt like erasure, as though my identity was being folded into Bella's storyline, like a spare page in her diary. My parents later insisted it was practical, that combining celebrations was easier for everyone, but what they meant was it was easier for them. Easier to keep the spotlight on the daughter who demanded it most. I thought about the hours I spent tutoring myself when they couldn't help with schoolwork, the jobs I picked up to pay for my own clothes and books, the silence I kept when Bella screamed for attention. I thought if I just excelled, if I just achieved more, proved more, sacrificed more, they would finally see me. That night taught me they never would. I sat in that dim kitchen, twirling cold pasta on a fork, and made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't beg for their approval anymore. If they couldn't show up when I earned the honor I had worked my whole life for, they wouldn't get to claim me when I built something greater on my own. And though my heart ached, I began to understand that family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up for you when it matters most. The next morning, I woke up with mascara still smudged under my eyes, though I hadn't even cried. That's what stung the most. There weren't any tears left in me, just a heavy kind of numbness that settled into my bones. I scrolled through my phone, and there it was. Dozens of photos my parents had posted from Bella's dinner, a table covered in candles, fancy desserts, everyone smiling like it was the happiest night of their lives. In the captions, my mother wrote, "So proud of our Bella, she deserves the world." My father commented, "Nothing better than celebrating our girl." Our girl, as if they only had one daughter. I stared at those words until my chest tightened, until I had to put the phone down because my hands were trembling. Not a single photo of me. Not a single mention of my 18th birthday, the one night I had quietly hoped might finally matter. The world saw a perfect family gathered around a glowing daughter, while I sat in my room staring at a leftover paper cup of cold soda from the fridge. That's when the pattern hit me like a slap. This wasn't new. This was years of being sidelined, of my achievements tucked behind Bella's spotlight. When I was 12 and won a regional spelling bee, they skipped the reception to drive her to a mall sale. When I performed in a school play, they left halfway through because Bella had a stomach ache. When I was 16 and got my first job, they didn't even ask where. It didn't matter to them, so long as Bella's needs were met first. And every time I told myself it was fine, that next time they'd notice. But they never did. That morning, looking at their smiling faces plastered online, I realized it wasn't forgetfulness. It was choice. They chose Bella. Every single time. And in choosing her, They erased me. Still, some stubborn piece of me longed to confront them, to hear them admit what I already knew. So I walked into the kitchen when they came home, my certificate tucked under my arm, my voice calm but shaking underneath. I said, "I won last night." I was honored. "Did you even know?" My mother barely glanced up from unloading grocery bags. "Of course we knew, honey. But Bella's dinner had been planned for weeks, and you know how important these things are for her future. Don't make it about you," my father added without looking me in the eye. "You'll have other ceremonies. Bella only turns 21 once." The way they said it, so casual, so dismissive, it made my stomach twist. Other ceremonies? As if the years I spent clawing my way to the top of my class could be repeated. As if turning 18, the legal step into adulthood, was just another Tuesday. They didn't even see the insult in their words. They thought they were being reasonable. And I stood there holding that certificate like a piece of paper could shield me from the truth settling into my chest. To them, I was an accessory, a background character in Bella's story. That's the day something inside me hardened. I stopped hoping for an apology that would never come. Instead, I started planning a life where they would watch from the sidelines, the same way they made me do all those years. Weeks passed, but the sting didn't fade. It grew sharper, like a shard of glass lodged under the skin. Every time I scrolled past the photos of Bella's dinner, the comments praising her, I felt my throat tighten. Friends asked me why I hadn't posted anything from my honor ceremony, and I brushed it off with excuses. "Oh, it wasn't a big deal," or "I just forgot." But inside, I hated myself for covering their neglect, for pretending it hadn't cut me to the bone. And Bella, she reveled in it. She paraded around in the dress they bought her, showing off the bracelet they gifted, the one they never would have spent money on for me. She even smirked at me one night and said, "Mom said your birthday was easier this way." We saved money combining dinners. Easier, cheaper. My life milestones boiled down to logistics and discounts. That night, lying awake in my dark room, I started replaying every moment of my childhood with new eyes. The birthday where Bella got a new bike and I got a used one, but they swore it was practical. The Christmas where I asked for art supplies but unwrapped socks, while Bella's gifts towered in shiny paper. The family trip where they forgot to pack my swimsuit, but Bella's had been custom ordered weeks before. I had trained myself to swallow those moments, to accept them as normal. But the more I remembered, the more it became impossible to ignore. I had been raised as the afterthought, the understudy to their shining star. And still, part of me burned for revenge. Not the kind with screaming or breaking plates, but something colder, sharper, the kind that couldn't be brushed off as teenage drama. I wanted them to feel the emptiness they had carved into me, to sit in silence and realize they had lost the daughter who would have stood by them without question. So I started saving every penny from my part-time job, planning an escape they wouldn't see coming. While Bella bragged about parties, and my parents poured money into her future, I was building mine in secret. Applications, scholarships, anything that could put miles between me and the house where I was invisible. And with each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. Because one day, when they turned to me expecting gratitude or support, I'd be gone. And maybe then, with their golden child still demanding and their spare child finally vanished, they'd realize too late what they had thrown away. The real shift came when college acceptance letters started rolling in. I had applied quietly, without their guidance or even their signatures, because I knew they wouldn't bother. Bella had been their entire focus. Sat tutors, campus tours, endless pep talks about her bright future. Me? I filled out applications on my phone during lunch breaks at work, using the library printer when no one was looking. When the first big envelope arrived, thick and heavy in my hands, I felt my chest swell in a way no approval from them ever had. It was proof that I wasn't invisible to the world, even if I was in my own family. But when I told them, when I walked into the living room with the letter clutched like a lifeline, my father barely looked up from the TV. "That's great, honey," he said flatly, as if I'd just told him I bought a new pair of socks. My mother chimed in with a distracted, "Well, don't get too far ahead of yourself. Bella's still waiting on her dream schools." And just like that, the moment I had dreamed of for years was reduced to a footnote in Bella's story once again. Bella smirked at me from the couch, scrolling on her phone, and said, "Well, we'll see who gets into the better one." That's when it hit me. They didn't just overlook me, they actively enjoyed diminishing me, as though keeping me small made Bella shine brighter. And instead of crying or begging them to see me, I felt something colder rise in my chest. Determination. If they wouldn't clap for me, then fine. I'd build a life so loud, so undeniable, that their silence would become the loudest sound of all. I doubled my hours at work, squirreled away money into a hidden account, and started planning for the day I'd walk out that door without a backward glance. Every rejection from them fueled me. Every slight was another brick in the wall I was building between us. They thought they were teaching me to accept being less. What they didn't know was that they were teaching me how to leave and never look back. I remember the day Bella finally got her acceptance letter to her so-called dream school. My parents threw an impromptu celebration in the kitchen, balloons taped sloppily to the ceiling, cake on the counter, champagne glasses clinking as if she had just been crowned queen. They posted photos online within minutes, hashtags like now proud parents and our future doctor flooding my feed. And me? I was standing right there in the corner, holding my own acceptance letters from 3 universities, including one ranked higher than hers, and not a single person even asked where I had gotten in. My mother brushed past me with frosting on her fingers and said, "Sweetie, could you take the group photo? The light's better from your angle." So there I stood, behind the lens, snapping the perfect shot that would be plastered across their walls and feeds, while my own news sat crumpled in an envelope on the counter. That night, in the quiet of my room, I laid out every acceptance letter on the bed. I read them again and again, letting the words soak into me. Words that didn't need my parents' approval to feel real. Scholarships, merit awards, opportunities that I had earned with no help, no cheerleaders, no handouts. And that's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to vanish from their narrative entirely. No announcement, no farewell dinner, no chance for them to turn my milestone into Bella's backdrop. I would go silent, and when they finally realized what they had lost, it would be too late. I started planning meticulously. I opened a P.O. box for my mail, set up forwarding under my own name, and told the admissions offices to contact me directly instead of calling the house. I kept working extra shifts at the cafe, folding my tips into envelopes and hiding them in the hollow base of an old lamp in my room, a spot I knew no one would bother with. I bought secondhand luggage at a thrift store, one piece at a time, so no one would suspect I was preparing to leave. Bella strutted around in her new college sweatshirt, bragging about how our parents would help her furnish her dorm room, while I learned how to survive on less, what textbooks I could rent, how to cook 3 meals from $5, which bus routes ran closest to campus. And though they thought I was quiet, sulking even, I was burning inside. Every word of dismissal, every laugh that brushed me aside, every time they called Bella our girl while treating me like a guest in my own home, it all fueled me. I imagined the day I'd be gone, the look on their faces when they realized their spare daughter had built a life without them. I imagined them scrolling through Facebook, searching for updates, only to find silence where I used to post scraps of my life. I imagined Bella floundering without someone to dim the lights for her spotlight. And I promised myself that when I left, I wouldn't just walk away. I'd close the door so firmly behind me that none of them would ever step into my world again. Because if 18 taught me anything, it was this. I couldn't force them to see me. But I could make sure that when they finally looked, they'd see nothing at all. I waited until the week before move-in day at my chosen university to execute my plan. While Bella was parading through Target with our parents, scanning items for her dorm like a royal procession, I quietly loaded my savings into a separate account and called the financial aid office to confirm my housing and meal plan. Everything was set, everything in my own name. No signatures from them, no emergency contact except a trusted friend from work. On the outside, I played my usual role, the quiet, dutiful daughter, nodding when my mother said, "We'll get you situated after Bella's settled," smiling faintly when my father added, "Don't worry, honey, we'll figure something out for you later." Inside, my heart was pounding with a mixture of rage and liberation. The night before Bella's move-in, while they were packing her final bags, I rolled my thrift store suitcase into the hallway. My room looked strange without my things, empty like a stage after the lights go down. I left my key on the dresser with a note that simply read, "Thank you for teaching me what I won't accept." No explanation, no address, no number to reach me. At dawn, I slipped out while the house was still asleep, dragging my suitcase down the driveway and into the waiting Uber I had scheduled under a new account. As the car pulled away, I glanced back at the house one last time. Not to say goodbye, but to memorize the site of the place where I had been invisible for 18 years. By the time they realized I was gone, I was already on campus, unpacking my small but entirely mine dorm room, hanging photos of my honor ceremony on the wall. It felt surreal. No Bella, no parents, no one calling me selfish for existing. Just me, my own name on the door, my own path ahead. They called, of course. Dozens of missed calls. Texts that started with confusion. "Where are you?" Then turned to guilt. "We didn't mean it like that." Then to anger. "You're being dramatic." I didn't answer a single one. I let the silence speak for me. Weeks later, a package arrived at the dorm with my name on it. A belated birthday card signed only Mom and Dad and a $50 bill inside. No note, no apology. I stared at it for a long time before tucking it into a drawer, unopened, like a relic from a life I no longer lived. I walked across campus that night under a sky full of stars, my scholarship ID clipped to my jacket, my heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. For the first time, the applause I heard in my head was my own. And as I stood there breathing in the cold air, I realized that the revenge I'd been craving wasn't a dramatic scene or a public reckoning. It was this: freedom, self-respect, and a future built entirely on my own terms. Months turned into a year, and with every passing season, the distance between me and them grew wider. Not just in miles, but in meaning. On campus, I found people who saw me, not as Bella's sister, not as the forgotten daughter, but as me. Professors knew my name, classmates celebrated my wins, friends showed up to small victories that my parents never even noticed. When I won a research grant, the university published my photo in the campus paper. I sent a copy to my parents out of habit. But deep down, I already knew it would sit unopened on a cluttered counter while they planned their next trip to visit Bella. Their silence confirmed it. They had chosen their golden child, and I had chosen myself. Sometimes Bella would try to break through the wall of silence. She'd text things like, "Mom says you're being cruel," or "You can't ignore family forever." Once she even called at midnight, her voice sharp with irritation. "You think you're better than us just because you left?" But I didn't take the bait. I realized her anger wasn't about me at all. It was about the shift in gravity. For the first time, Bella wasn't the center of someone's universe. My absence had created a void at home, one they couldn't fill with money or parties or Instagram posts. I heard from a cousin that at family gatherings, my parents had stopped bringing me up. It was easier to pretend I didn't exist than admit to others that I had walked away. But every time someone asked about me, their silence became another kind of confession. They couldn't claim my successes because they hadn't built them, and they couldn't frame my absence as rebellion without exposing the years of neglect that drove me out. That silence became my quiet revenge, louder than any argument could have been. Meanwhile, I thrived. I decorated my dorm with notes and reminders of the promises I had made to myself. Never beg to be seen. Never shrink to fit. Each semester I built on my independence, carving out a life they had no part in. My revenge wasn't slamming the door in their faces. It was proving every single day that the daughter they erased was capable of becoming everything without them. And though sometimes late at night the ache of being unwanted still lingered, I reminded myself I wasn't invisible anymore. I had become undeniable, even if they would never admit it. By my second year away, the phone calls had dwindled to nothing, replaced by an occasional email that felt more like a formality than an attempt at reconciliation. "Hope you're doing well. Don't forget to study hard." Short lines without substance, without apology. I stopped replying, and after a while, they stopped sending them too. I thought maybe they would come find me, show up at my campus unannounced, but they never did. It was easier for them to act like I had slipped out of existence, like I had never really been theirs in the first place. But then something unexpected happened. My achievements started circulating outside of campus. An article I co-authored got published, my name was mentioned in local news, and suddenly relatives who had always looked past me started to notice. At Thanksgiving, I wasn't there, but my aunt apparently pulled up the article on her phone, reading my name aloud across the table. Bella's face, I was told, soured immediately. My parents tried to brush it off. "She's just busy with school," but everyone could see the cracks. They couldn't brag about me because that would mean admitting they hadn't supported me. They couldn't ignore me either, because others were starting to ask questions. And that was the sweetest revenge of all, knowing they were trapped in the silence they had created. forced to choke on the fact that I was thriving without them. Meanwhile, I built a circle of friends who felt more like family than the people who raised me ever had. They showed up at my presentations, celebrated my birthday with messy dorm cakes and laughter, cheered when I landed an internship I had fought tooth and nail to earn. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't expensive, but it was real. And every time someone looked me in the eye and said, "We're proud of you," I felt the weight of those empty bleachers lift a little more from my chest. I used to think revenge had to be sharp, loud, dramatic. But standing there, surrounded by people who chose me, I realized it was something quieter, something steadier. Revenge was building a life so full and undeniable that the people who erased me had no place in it anymore. Revenge was never giving them the chance to dim my light again. And though I would never get back the years of being unseen, I finally understood. The power wasn't in making them pay. It was in making myself free. Graduation came faster than I expected. 4 years of sleepless nights, endless work shifts, and silent victories had passed like a heartbeat. And suddenly, I was standing in a black gown under a sky full of confetti, my name echoing across the loudspeakers. This time the applause didn't sound polite or scattered. It roared, filling every corner of the auditorium because these people knew me. They had watched me fight for everything I had, watched me claw my way out of invisibility. When I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, I didn't search the crowd for my parents. I already knew they weren't there. They had sent no RSVP, no message, no flowers. But this time, their absence didn't hollow me out. It made the space feel bigger, freer, mine. My friends were there instead, waving signs they had made with my name in bold letters, yelling themselves hoarse. Professors shook my hand and said things like, "You've built a future no one can take from you." When the ceremony ended, we spilled out into the sunlight, and someone popped a cheap bottle of sparkling cider, spraying it over my cap while we laughed. It wasn't the glossy, picture-perfect celebration my parents used to stage for Bella. It was real, earned and full of love. Later that night, alone in my tiny apartment, I opened a letter that had arrived a week before. It was from a major research institute offering me a fully funded position, a chance to move across the country and start a career most people my age only dreamed about. I thought about the girl who once sat at a kitchen table twirling cold pasta on her 18th birthday, staring at a Post-it note instead of a cake. I thought about the empty bleachers, the silent rides home, the constant message that I was less. And then I looked at the life I had built without them. My degree, my job offer, my chosen family. That was my revenge, not the shouting match I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my head, not the dramatic confrontation where they finally admitted their cruelty, but this, the quiet, undeniable proof that I had turned their neglect into fuel. People sometimes asked me if I would ever forgive them, if I'd ever go back. And I would smile and say, forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I didn't hate them anymore. I had stopped needing them to be different. But I also didn't leave the door open. They had made their choice every time they chose Bella over me. And now I was making mine. My story was no longer written in their margins. It was mine alone, bold and full and whole. And in the soft glow of that apartment, holding my offer letter, I realized something else too. The revenge I had been chasing all these years had transformed. It wasn't about making them feel small. It was about refusing to be small myself ever again. Years later, I found myself walking through a city that had nothing to do with the one I grew up in. A skyline that belonged entirely to me. Streets where no one knew me as Bella's sister. Offices where my name was on the door, and people sought me out for my ideas, not for what I could do to make someone else shine brighter. My parents never visited, not once. They sent the occasional holiday card, stiff and generic, signed with both their names but no warmth between the lines. Bella kept her distance too, though sometimes I would hear about her through distant relatives. How her life hadn't gone quite as perfectly as they had promised. How she stumbled when there was no one left to dim the lights for her spotlight. Part of me wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever replayed that smirk when she told me my birthday was easier this way. I didn't hate her anymore, but I also didn't forgive her. She had been old enough to know better, and she still chose to stand on their side. What surprised me most was how little I thought about them at all. For so long, my energy had been tied to the ache of their absence, to the hunger for a place in their story. But once I walked away, once I built a life without them, they became background noise. Faint, static, irrelevant. One night, sitting in my apartment with the windows open and the city lights reflecting on my walls. I looked back at the girl I had been at 18, the one sitting in a dark kitchen with cold pasta, wondering if she had ever mattered. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "You were always enough." You didn't need their applause, their approval, their staged family photos. You just needed to believe in yourself long enough to get out. That's what I had done. Turned silence into strength, turned erasure into existence, turned invisibility into undeniable presence. My revenge was never about punishing them. It was about refusing to let their neglect define me. And in that way, I had won. Now, when I celebrate milestones, birthdays, promotions, even quiet victories no one else sees, I do it loudly, joyfully, surrounded by people who show up because they choose to, not because they feel obligated. And every laugh, every cheer, every candle blown out feels like a reclamation of all the moments they tried to erase. I am not the daughter they ignored. I am the woman they never expected me to become. And I have learned that the loudest revenge isn't screaming or slamming doors. It's living a life so full, so bright, so entirely yours that the people who overlooked you have no choice but to sit in the dark they created. Tell me, if it had been you, would you have walked away in silence like I did? Or would you have turned back for one last confrontation before closing that door forever?